Thank you very much for joining me on this video. I want to talk to you about one single overriding principle that I believe is the most important factor when it comes to being successful or not being successful in being a landlord and building an investment portfolio. And that is learn to delegate. When I do my investment seminars, I will say this. I'll say, let's suppose that you are a plumber and you buy an investment property. You get a call from the tenant, and the tenant tells you the tap is dripping. Call a plumber, don't be the plumber. You know, apart from bad tenants, the single most important factor that causes people to lose the dream and get out of being a landlord and never seeing the goal of passive income and wealth on retirement is because they don't learn to delegate. Now, there are some exceptions. Let's suppose you're retired, lots of time in your hands, you're bored, you want something to do, you want to go over and cut the lawn, you want to go over and clean up the trash, you want to go over and count the bricks. That's fine. But most of you who are involved in this Money Machine seminar are actively involved in some kind of employment already. You're a doctor or a lawyer, or you're an accountant, or you're a hairdresser, or you're a plumber already. You've already got an occupation and you work hard to earn a living. You don't need another job. And what'll happen is you'll get a second occupation if you're not careful. I know the argument. You say, well, I'm handy. So if a tenant calls up and all of a sudden they're plugging in a utensil in the wall and it doesn't work, and they plug into another plug and it doesn't work, I can go over and check the fuses. I can do some things. I'm not an electrician, but I can do these things. Or if the washer and dryer, one or the other isn't working, I can go check and see if the load was balanced or if some garment went over the side. I don't need to call a tradesman in. I can do that. And certainly between tenants, heck, I can paint. And so you start doing these things. But bear in mind, that's fine perhaps when you have one property. Our goal is for you to have 10 properties. And they're going to be a mixture of single, duplexes, triplexes. So maybe you've got 16 or 18 different rentable units. Well, now instead of getting one call every so often, you're going to get 16 or 17 calls every so often. And you're going to get to the point that you just hate having the phone ring. You want to make the inconvenience stop. I don't want you to get to that point. The other thing is you need to keep in mind is that you're paying these repairs in before tax dollars, not after tax dollars. As you develop your investment portfolio, you will be in the upper tax bracket marginal income when you add your rental income to your employment income. So you're going to be paying in excess of 50% tax on your marginal bracket. So if you have a service bill for $100, it actually costs you less than $50. So just in terms of economies of scale, it makes sense. I've been doing this for 40 years. Let me share, actually more than 40 years, consistently. And I'm still in the game. And I don't have property managers. I do it myself. And let me share a couple of personal experiences. So I get a phone call from a tenant who says, my oven isn't working. I said, well, is your stovetop working? Yes, well then it isn't the main fuse panel. But I said, there's fuses in the stove sometimes. Check and see. They checked around. They called back and they said, no, I couldn't find any fuses that were a problem. Well, I could go over there and maybe find some fuses. They couldn't. But instead I called a service company. Service company got there and found out that the tenant had played around with a timer, and that's why the oven didn't work. Now, I could have sent the bill to the tenant, probably should have, but I don't, because I don't want to get into a war with my tenant over $150. And I could have gone over there and figured it out myself, but I don't need the aggravation and the nuisance. I called the service repair company, and I forgot about it. I never thought about it again until the tenant called me to say everything was working fine, and I got the bill. No problem. On another occasion, I had a tenant, and a plumber went in there on some kind of a routine call. They were renting a main floor in the basement, and he told me there was junk everywhere, and there was a bunch of people living there that weren't supposed to. He said, Wayne, you need to look after this. Well, I called up the tenant, and I said, you know, I need to come in and inspect the place. I'll come in next week, and I set a time. Before that deadline, the upstairs tenant called and told me the main floor tenant had moved out. No surprise. Did I go over there? No, I didn't. I called a handyman and I said, I need you to clean up a bunch of junk. I figured there would be a bunch of junk there. Well, he ended up putting a 22-foot dumpster in the driveway and filled it to heaping. After he cleaned out all the debris that was left behind, then I called a cleaning company to go in and clean. And they did that. Only then did I go have a look. Why? Because I don't need to be depressed. I don't need to go through and see this mountain of mess that I've got to contend with. And that's why we have service people. That's why if you've got a 100-unit apartment building, you've got an on-site superintendent. That's why if you have a plaza, you have a management company. It's to distance you from the day-to-day activity. And I'm telling you, right from the get-go, get used to doing that. It will save you a lot of problem, and I really want you to be in it for the long haul. I want you to be in it 20 years from the time you start. I want you to have an investment portfolio of at least 10 properties. I want you to have more income than you ever had in your working life, and I don't want you to be stressed out. Write it down. Keep it in front of you. Resist the temptation. Delegate. Thanks very much for joining me in this video. I'll talk to you again next week.